I'm Tanya Caldwell from Royal LePage Atlantic, and I just wanted to say a big thanks for having me here today. I'm really excited. This talk is really important to me. Language is really important to me, how we speak to each other, how other people interpret what we say. So I'm always delighted to be able to share the talk with others. So a little bit about me. Where's my clicky thing? There we go. Okay. A little bit about me. Once again, realtor for 8 years with Royal LePage. I was born in St. John's, Newfoundland, and grew up there and moved here about 16 years ago or so. I am the mother of a beautiful daughter, 27-year-old daughter. And if any of you follow me on Instagram, you will know that I am an extremely dedicated cat mama. My education, I did a double honors degree in sociology and cultural anthropology with a minor in history. And I've continued to study that all this time. And I'm especially fascinated with how language affects people from different groups, whether it be cultural or religious or whatever else. So that's something that I really sort of kept my eye on. And I'm also very sensitive about language just personally, and that's a big part of why I love to give this talk, and I'll give you a little story of how the evolution of this talk began. So I am, as you can probably see, biracial. I was born to a white mother and a Black father, but I'm actually adopted, and I was adopted into this lovely family, the Colbos, when I was 3. This is our first family photo. I'd like to point out my dad. Very clear who the favorite child in our family is. It began at this moment. And I was the only Black person I knew or had ever met, even though I didn't even really meet yourself, in St. John's until I was 16 years old. So I had a lot of struggles myself with how people spoke to me, how people approached me and asked me questions about my life and etc. And just language has been something that has made me very sensitive in my life, and I'm very aware of that. And so it's something that obviously I'm hypersensitive of, and I'm very conscious of how I speak to people and how I present myself when it comes to language. So I'm going to tell you a story. So everybody who knows me, has heard me speak, knows that I like to speak. I think some of the best ways that you remember the things that people are going to tell you is to speak from personal experience and to explain maybe the history behind what you're talking about. And that's how we're going to do this today. So I'm going to start by telling you a very personal story about language and something really simple that people say to me and how much it affects me. And it's interesting, and I like to tell this story because I think you'll realize this is a perfect example of how the simplest things that nobody means in a bad way, and all the things we're going to talk about today are words and phrases that we might use that we don't think mean anything harmful, and that we don't mean them in a bad way. But just remembering this story will kind of, I hope, remind you of how you never know what you say, how what you say is going to affect somebody. So and this is the perfect season actually to tell you the story because it's about to start any given minute now that it's getting sunny out. My friends, colleagues, people, random people that I meet do this thing with me where they put in the summertime when they get a tan, they put their skin, their arm up to my arm, and they go, man, look, I'm blacker than you are. Stop. Happens all the time. I'm waiting for it. When summer comes, I think about the fact that this is something that people are going to say. And nobody ever means it in a bad way. And my friends are very sensitive about language as well. It's just something that they don't think about. And I admit, I do not correct anybody. But I want to tell you the domino effect of what happens when people say this really, really simple thing to me. So, it's said, I always, do the cordial, yeah, you're totally right. It's an observation. I'm quite light-skinned, and there's a very good chance that in the summertime, you might be darker than I am. I know that it's not meant harmfully. I don't get upset about it in that way, but it really does upset me. And after people say that to me, I will go almost immediately, as soon as I am physically able to do it, I will go to a drugstore and I will buy self-tanner. And I will tan my skin until I think that I'm dark enough that people won't say it because it bothers me so much. And you might ask why it bothers me. And truth be told, I don't have to tell you why it bothers me because realistically speaking, How people feel about the language that other people use or how they interpret it is very private. But I will tell you, because I think it's important to understand this story. So it bothers me. This is partially why it bothers me. It bothers me because I am a person that grew up in an all-white family. I grew up in an all-white community. I am quite fair-skinned. And the question of where I come from and whether I fit into the Black community was something that was always very hard on me, as you can imagine, when I didn't grow up with anybody who was like me. And so it's something that I'm really sensitive about. And even though people don't mean it in a bad way, it really hurts. I almost always will walk away in tears when somebody says that to me. It just makes me feel, and it stirs up all of these things about where I come from, my sense of community, and all these things that nobody that would ever say that comment would ever be thinking of, right? And so this really comes, and this sort of brings together what the moral of this story is. And it's going to be the moral of the entire talk today. And it's the most important thing that I want you to take from this. It's not what you say that counts, but it's how what you say makes other people feel. And let me say that again. I want you to remember when it comes to language that you might mean things totally innocently. It might be something that everybody has always said, but in the end, all that matters is how what you say makes the people you say it to feel. And that's what we want to remember today, okay? So I want to give you a little story about the evolution of this talk. So I went to my broker and Mark Doucette, and I was really upset about a term that we were constantly using in real estate that was really bothering me. And it bothered me especially because I'd had a really bad experience with clients using the term. And so I went to him and said, Mark, what can I do to change this and to help people stop saying this word and to make them understand? And he said, I would love it if you came to our sales meeting and told everybody this story. So that's how it started. And then NSAR heard about it. And they asked me to do a webinar about it and to expand on it. And that was really exciting. And then last year, I was asked by Royal LePage National to do the speech at our national conference, which was really amazing. And now I'm here today at KW and very excited to be here. So basically what we're going to do today, I'm going to talk to you about 3 terms that I think that we use a lot specifically in real estate. And then I'm going to talk about some other terms that I would call sort of office lingo, that are words and phrases. And some of these you're going to see and go, oh, of course. And others are really going to surprise you. I'm going to give you some really cool history lessons. I'm going to explain where these words and phrases come from. I'm going to say what I think you mean when you say it and a better way to say it. And we're just going to have some fun with it. And you're going to learn a whole pile. And I want to clarify as well that for this talk, because my studies in university and since then, and because of my background in the Black community, I have geared most of this towards the Black and Indigenous communities of North America. But we are going to talk about some religious groups as well. And just, I want to make it very clear that I understand that I'm not picking these 2 cultures specifically because I think they're the most important. I'm only picking them because they're the ones that I'm most familiar with and that I feel the most comfortable and that I feel that I have a little bit more understanding to speak about. So I just wanted to make that very clear. All right, let's get started. This is how it all began. Master bedroom and master bathroom. So what do you say? What do you mean when you say master bedroom and master bathroom? You mean the biggest, baddest bedroom in the house and the adjoining bathroom. We all know that. And I'm going to tell you the story of how this talk all began and the story that happened to me about it might even be 3.5, 4 years now, that happened to me when I was doing a viewing. So I was showing this gorgeous condo townhouse to this lovely family, to a Black Nova Scotian family. And we get to the primary bedroom and I walk in and I go, oh my gosh, look at this master bedroom. It's incredible. And then I go in the bathroom and I'm squealing about how the master bathroom has this incredible separate shower and standalone tub. And I'm so delighted. And I come out and the whole family is just sitting there staring at me with utter disgust. And I was so shocked. I just come out and I'm like, whoa, is everything okay? And they say, the mother says to me, I can't believe you just said that. And I said, what? I don't know what you're talking, no idea what she was talking about. And she said, that, you realtors, you use those terms all the time and you think that it's okay and it's not okay. And she was so angry with me. And I looked at her, still had no idea. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. And she said, master bedroom and master bathroom. I still didn't make the reference. So I said, I am so sorry. I don't know what I've said to offend you, but I'm really sorry. And at this point, she's welled with tears. She's shaking. She's so mad. And then she goes, master bedroom and master's bathroom is a reference to slavery. It comes from the master's bedroom and the master's bathroom. And it was like, ding. And I just stood there, and then my eyes were welled with tears because I saw how upset I had made this woman. And let me tell you, every single time I walk into a primary bedroom, I think about that story. It upsets me so much because I pride myself on being a person that's really sensitive towards language. And I managed to hurt somebody to the point of tears. And she was even more offended because I was a member of the Black community and that I didn't pick up on it. And then she, proceeded to tell me how her great-grandmother was a slave. Mine probably was too. And I went home, and I tell you, I didn't sleep a wink that night. It was awful. And it was one of those things that, and we have, NSCR is doing so much work to help us change this language. And I'm so appreciative of it, right? They changed the way that we input master bedroom and master bathroom to primary bedroom and primary bathroom. And they did that for exactly this reason. But the problem is that even though people are inputting it correctly, I still constantly see it on write-ups. I hear agents call it that in an open house. And I admit, since I started this talk probably a year ago, I've definitely seen a big decline. But I guess my big thing with it and why it's first and why I went to my broker is because it is specifically a real estate term. It is a word and a term that if we stop using it, everybody will stop using it. And I think we have an epic amount of power here and a chance to really make a change and really stop this language from ever being used, right? Because if we don't use it, our clients will stop using it. And I'm going to talk at the end about some great ways to help people adjust their language. And one of them, obviously, is you just constantly using the correct language, right? So, but it's just really important. And the history of this term, I should say, actually, as well. It was coined in a 1926 Sears catalog, and it was describing this gorgeous Dutch colonial home and the sprawling second floor bedroom and the adjoining bathroom. And that is where master bedroom and master bathroom, that's how it was born into real estate, funny enough. So instead of saying master bedroom and master bathroom, this one's so easy, as we know, this is the gorgeous master bedroom. So just say the main bedroom, primary, or ensuite. And can I just say, isn't ensuite bath or the ensuite so much sexier than saying the master bathroom? It's so much better. Or your sanctuary, as I like to call it. All right, number 2, this one was a really sad one. And this was another one that was immediately on my list when I knew I wanted to talk about some more words and phrases. This one has a really sad history for sure. Ghetto. It really bothers me when I hear agents describe a neighborhood as ghetto, right? Because ghetto is steeped in some seriously horrific history, this word. And there's no neighborhood in all of Nova Scotia that is anything near a ghetto, right? And that's the part of the problem. So a ghetto. The history of the word ghetto goes back way farther than I realized. Ghetto is actually an Italian word, borghetto. And borghettos were areas in Italy in the 15 and 1600s where Jewish people were confined to. They were always areas that were not in the best area of town. And they were always places that didn't even have the most basic services that humans deserved, like running water and clean water and access to food and etc. And then the term was again used in the Holocaust to talk about where Jewish people once again were confined to if they were not taken to concentration camps, or maybe while they were waiting to go to concentration camps, they were kept in ghettos. And then finally, and this is how I always thought about ghettos, is primarily in the United States. We think of ghettos as being, so basically the history of the ghetto in the United States is that after the abolition of slavery, piles of slaves, of freed slaves from the South migrated north. Because if you know anything about American history, the North was the safe place to be if you were a Black American. So the thing was that with this mass migration, then a lot of cities and states decided to sort of enact policies that controlled where these Black communities were. And once again, they were always in areas that were very socially and politically disadvantaged. And once again, without barely any basic services. So I looked up some meanings in the Urban Dictionary and just in a standard dictionary of what ghetto means. And I came up with, it kept repeating poor, cheap, and substandard, and often associated with race, poverty, and socioeconomic status, and drugs, violence, and crime. But the saddest thing, and this actually made my eyes well up with tears, and I think this is going to be enough for everybody in this room to never say this word again if you do, which is totally understandable, is this. A historical meaning of a ghetto is a place where people of lesser value live. I can't imagine that anybody in this room would ever want to refer to any area as that. So, and this was a really hard one for me to give you a replacement for because it's just such a negative word. So if you don't like an area that you might consider not a great area for your clients to live in, then just say why. I'm really uncomfortable with you living, I wanted to just talk to you about this area because it does have a really high crime rate. And I worry about that a little bit because you have small children or whatever else. And just say the factual reason behind why you don't like it. But let's not use the word ghetto because it's just awful. That's okay.
This neighborhood tradition has been a little bit challenged in terms of community. They are trying to turn things around. There's a lot of great things happening, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's all right. I mean, I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form, but if somebody said that to me, I definitely would not be offended in comparison to if somebody called, you know, North Dartmouth the ghetto, which I hear quite a bit. It drives me nuts. Yeah, really, really. So, and I want you to also think about these couple of things as well when we're thinking about ghetto. One, you might really be mischaracterizing a neighborhood that you might have thought you knew more about. Like it might have changed, like you said, substantially since, you know, since you first labeled it that, or since it was first labeled that. And second, and this I really want you to think about, if you have clients or family or colleagues or friends that have ever actually lived in an area that would be considered a ghetto or a shantytown or a slum or a favela, how offended do you think they're going to be when you throw around the term ghetto when you're talking about a neighborhood anywhere in Nova Scotia, right? So we always want to think about that too. All right, this one is really cool. It's one of my favorites because I usually shock most people, and this one was a bit of a surprise to me and somebody had mentioned it to me years ago and I kind of forgot about it. And then when I was giving the talk, I couldn't even believe that the US history behind this one. So you're going to get a really cool US history lesson. Grandfathered in. So we use grandfathered in quite a bit. What do we mean? So we mean a rule that applies to an existing situation that if it was a situation in the future, a new rule would apply. It's exempt from that rule, right? So I think of rights of way. I think of maybe a well, the location of a well. We often hear they're often, you know, you can't have a well too close to a lake, but if it's an older well, then it's grandfathered in, right? So I'm on the committee on PMAC, as well as the Diversity and Inclusion, the IDEA committee at NSAR. And this term gets used all the time. And I wrote Tanya White after the last meeting and said, I'm going to stand up at the next meeting and talk to everybody about this word because I want to give them the history on it because it's actually a very interesting lesson. So 1870 in the United States, the 15th Amendment was ratified to the US Constitution, and it was a huge deal. It gave people the right to vote, regardless of the color of their skin, their race, or their history in slavery or servitude. So basically, it gave Black people the right to vote. It was a huge and momentous deal. But there were 9 southern states, I don't think that I need to tell you which ones, you could probably guess, that relied heavily on the cotton industry that obviously did not want Black people having any rights per se and wanted to keep slavery going. So they enacted laws at a statewide level to circumvent this. And there were 3 of them. The first one was that they initiated polling taxes, knowing full well that most Black people wouldn't be able to pay the tax and therefore couldn't vote. They had literary tests at polling stations. So then once again, knowing that there was a very small chance that a person of color would be able to read or write. And the third was they enacted the grandfather clause. So the grandfather clause meant, sure, yeah, you can totally vote if you want to, as long as your grandfather was a registered voter before 1867. And knowing that that was impossible because this amendment was only enacted in 1870, it was this way to get around this incredible, amazing amendment to the Constitution and make so that Black people couldn't vote. So it's one of those things that, and I know it's one of those things that most people don't realize. I didn't know the true history of it until I really went and researched it. But when I researched, and I researched this stuff for months about, and every time I would go to different lists and different websites and et cetera, and went to the library and blah, 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 grandfathered in kept coming up over and over and over again. So definitely one that we really want to consider, because it basically robbed Black Americans of a right that they had been given on a national level. All right, so now those are the what I like to call the big three. And now we're just going to quickly go over some office terms that I think that we use quite a bit.
What do we use instead of grandfather then?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Exempt, nice and easy. Yeah, so you just say it's exempt from that rule.
Yeah.
It's so easy. That's one of the easiest ones to replace,
Yeah.
because that's literally all it is. Sorry about that. Thank you. I forget that I have the clicker and then I'm talking. And, okay, so let's go with powwow. Has anybody in this room ever had the privilege of seeing a powwow? Me too. I saw one when I was about 10 years old, and I have goosebumps when I say the word and I think about it, because it's one of the most beautiful celebrations I have ever seen in my life. Powwows are a celebration of Indigenous culture, community, their art, their history, their lives. These are incredibly epic celebrations. They take months to plan, and they are extremely significant. So how do you think an Indigenous person or somebody that understands the background of the word powwow would feel when you refer to a 10-minute conference call with Bob as a powwow? Not the same thing. So instead of saying powwow, just say what it is. It's a meeting, or it's a brainstorming session, or maybe it's a get-together, because some people use it for that too. Okay. Sorry, I'm such a cue card person. I can't. I started it when I was in high school, and I've never stopped. And I rewrote them last night because you learn, you remember it better. I can't even. It's ridiculous. My daughter's like, it's so embarrassing. Okay, next one. Savage. What do you mean when you say you're savage? You're mad. They were savage with you. And let me tell you, this one I think of, and I think Jillian will get me, that this one is one that is used a lot. It is a huge part of Newfoundland language. Oh, I was savage about it. I was, right? It's something that we say a lot. And it took me a really long time to stop saying this word. And I actually stopped saying it because I made an Indigenous friend a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I said it, and she got really upset and sort of gave me a really great explanation as to why the word upset her, and was very kind to me and understanding that I didn't mean it in the way that she thought. And but still to see the emotion. And this was once again a word when I studied that kept coming up and kept coming up and kept coming up. So this was a way, savage was what? It was a way that Indigenous people were described in North America. And it was, and also all sorts of people from the BIPOC community all over the world. Calling a group savage was a way to justify eradicating and colonizing groups of people. Think residential schools, right? And the saddest thing that I learned about the word savage is that savage is the N-word to Indigenous people. And I'm standing here in front of you today as somebody who has been called the N-word many a time. I know how harmful it is. And to learn that that is how Indigenous people feel when we use that word, they consider it to be a racial slur. And when they hear it, no matter how they know, even though in their heads, they know that you're not meaning it towards them, it still really upsets them to hear it. It is a word used in that context that they don't ever want to hear because it's really harmful to them. And in the grand scheme of things, also, obviously, considering our past in Canada and in North America in general, you know, calling in the Indigenous history, obviously, whatever they did to protect their land and their families is obviously something that they and a lot of people, including myself, feel was extremely justified, right? So instead of saying savage, just say that you're mad or you're angry or you're upset.
Or if you're in Newfoundland, say
Rotted, totally. Totally, absolutely. Okay. Sold me down the river. I can't believe how much I still hear this word, and it was this phrase, and it wasn't really one that I really thought about that much. But so what do you mean when you say somebody sold me down the river? They duped you. They betrayed you basically for their own good. And it happens to us in real estate all the time. And some of us use the term and some of us might not, but I do hear it from time to time, so I wanted to add it. And these are in no particular order either, so don't think that one's more important than the other. So in the late 1700s to mid 1800s, that was when there was this huge boom, this demand for global cotton. And what this meant is that they needed more slaves for the South. And one thing you need to know about slavery in the United States was that there was a huge difference between being a slave in the North and a slave in the South. If you were a slave in the North, there is a very good chance you were treated a lot better than if you were in the South, because the northern states tended to have a better attitude towards slavery and humanity, and might have had slaves, but often treated them very differently. They often made an effort to keep families together. And often your slavery or your servitude was working in somebody's home. It wasn't being out in 40-degree weather in cotton fields, working yourself to death. So and the problem was that once this demand came, then all of these Southern plantation owners were calling out saying, we'll pay you triple for your slaves if you'll sell us your slaves from the North to the South, because they just needed more and more and more and more and more. So can you imagine how scary it was for a Northern slave to find out that they were getting sold to the South? And sold down the river comes from the fact that they were transported through the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers. So being sold down the river was one of the scariest things that could happen to a slave, because they knew that their life was going to change. They were often then separated from families. Often children wouldn't be taken or whatever else. Lineages would be broken. It was really scary times for sure. So instead of saying that, just say somebody betrayed you or they duped you. Nice and easy. All right. This one is really fun because it surprises everybody, and I was completely shocked by it, and I had no idea where any of these terms came from, and I can't believe the history of it. So, a cakewalk. It was a cakewalk, or it was a piece of cake. Where does that come from? So, in plantation times in the Southern United States, white slave owners and plantation owners used to love to do this thing called the cakewalk. And it was a way of getting their slaves in the evening to entertain them. What they would do is they would dress them up in their fancy clothes. They would bring them from all plantations around, and they would gather at somebody's house, and they would make them compete by dancing and prancing around and pretending that they were white people. It was really exaggerated. There was a lot of head tilting and prancing. And as you can imagine, the prize was a cake. The white plantation owners felt that the slaves should be so thankful for this opportunity, when obviously it was really demeaning to the slaves. And not only that, but if the slave did too well or not well enough, this cakewalk competition could easily end very badly for them at the end of the night. So this is one of these ones that I hear, and I didn't realize this, that cakewalk is used a lot in schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, Totally.
Yeah, I used to organize the cakewalk.
Yes. So thanks, Umi. So it's one of those ones that I just wanted to mention in case your kids' schools do it, that you might want to give whoever,
Yeah,
you
that
know,
was
give
always
some,
the favorite thing to
Totally.
prepare, right?
give
Okay.
people a little, and you know what? And it's one of these things. I'm like, you don't have to erase history, but just explain the history. So even just going to and having the kids have a little understanding of the background of it in some way that won't be, too scary depending on how old they are. But that might be even helpful as well. But at least the school's understanding where that comes
Yeah,
from.
they would have.
And that's also where it was a piece of cake comes from. And I had no idea. So instead, just say what it is. It was really easy. There. This one, I don't think needs any explanation, but I had to throw it in there anyways. Cracking the whip or whipping people into shape. Anything to do with a whip. Let's just take that out of our vocabulary would be great. So obviously you mean just making somebody work harder, right? Or somebody's making you work harder or too hard. But this is how people throughout history that have been submitted, have been used as slaves, and that can be different religious groups, different cultural groups, different races, everything. This is how people were made submissive, was with a whip. It's also how animals are made submissive, which makes sense because throughout history, the people that were forced into slavery and servitude in that way, in a way that would require a whip, were considered to be no more valuable than an animal, right? So this was one I can't give you a word for because I hate it. I'm not going to lie to you. So just ask people politely to work harder would be great. Okay, there you go. Plantations. All right. This one, I put all these together because they're kind of similar. Circling the wagons, holding down the fort, and on the warpath, especially this last one. So what do we mean? We mean circling the wagon, we're getting ready for a fight, we're getting ready, maybe for a really tough negotiation, or somebody's on the warpath, they're super mad, right? So it was a way of describing Indigenous people attacking white settlements. Circling the wagons or holding it, this is what they would do. So anytime they thought Indigenous people were going to attack, they put the women and children in the middle and they circled the wagons around them. And this was the way of protecting their area. And this was once again being protected from the savage Indigenous people who really might have just been attacked by somebody else or are just defending their land and their families. So instead of that, we can just say that you're getting ready for a tough fight, or you're holding it together, or somebody is mad and looking for someone to blame. But these are once again, are one of these sayings. These sayings are just kind of steeped in some bad history. This one I also feel is very important, and I still hear all the time. Calling people chief. What is a chief? A chief is a member of a band, Indigenous band or clan, who has either been made the leader of this clan or band by either bloodlines or by being elected by its fellow band members. When you call somebody in the office, your boss or whoever, your buddy, chief, you are trivializing this incredibly important position in the Indigenous community. And it's one of those ones that I know nobody means anything bad for. You're just like, hey, chief, what's up? Or, say to your boss, chief, what do you need from me today? But realistically speaking, if I were an Indigenous person, I'm pretty sure I'd be very upset if I heard somebody refer to their boss as chief when this is a chief. And it's a really incredibly important and sacred position. So instead, just say, it's your boss or your buddy. All right, this one I heard while I was rewriting my notes last night on a show and cringed and went, oh, I'm so glad I'm talking about this one today. Oh, sorry, our pal. Any derivative of the word slave ever. This is us slaving in a kitchen. This is us being a slave to our work. And this is slaving in a plantation. It's probably 40 degrees. These people are always being watched by somebody who would usually be cracking the whip. These people have barely enough water to drink to survive, barely enough food to eat. There are no breaks. They will work until they're in base, usually it's often until they collapse or until they are luckily told to stop. And it also, when you think of the word slave, also think of the word or the phrase working to the bone, because working to the bone is also a reference to any type of slavery from any culture or community in which somebody was worked with manual labor so hard that they literally could see bone because their skin had been worn away. I admit, and it's partly because I'm a part of the Black community, that this really bothers me, but I know, and you have to remember that we don't want to pick and choose. Okay, so I shouldn't say chief when I'm around an Indigenous person, or I shouldn't say this when I'm here or there, because any one of these words or terms, if anybody really understands the cultural significance, regardless of whether they're a member of that community or not, they're going to be upset by it too, right? I'm upset by so many words and phrases, which I brought up today, that stem from the Indigenous community. And I'm not a member of the Indigenous community, but I have Indigenous friends. I've studied a lot, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. And you never know who you're talking to is going to be passionate about what, regardless of whether they're in that community or not, right? So instead of saying that you're slaving, just say that you're working really hard. And last but not least, this one happens to me all the time. Where are you from? Hi, I'm Tammy Colbo. Where are you from? Oh, Newfoundland. No, you know what I mean. No, where are you from? Newfoundland. No, I know, but you know what I mean. Where are you from? Newfoundland. It is not okay to assume that because somebody has a different color skin or they have a different accent, that they aren't Canadian, because they easily could be. You can be a 4th generation Canadian and still have an accent. And people and anybody that I know, because I watch it happen to my friends as well in the BIPOC community, when somebody says to them where they're from, I watch their face. It's a hard thing to have somebody say to you. And furthermore, as somebody standing in front of you today who's adopted, which we talked about, I don't like where you're from because I don't know where I'm from. And so when you ask me where I'm from, all I'm thinking is, do I make up something? I know what they're talking about. And it's gotten to the point where sometimes when I'm with a large group of people and everybody's asking me, I just start making stuff up. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know, whatever. But it's something nobody should have to defend where they're from or have to tell you where they're from if they don't want to. So please.
Don't want to interrupt you, but
No.
fine with this new foreign buyer ban that you almost feel like, I feel like and I wrote my MP about this.
Yes, no, I know what you're going to say, and I agree.
I am feeling racist when I ask an Asian person that calls me or I have a meeting with, I have to ask them how long they've been in Canada.
Yeah.
And I said, I feel like I'm profiling someone.
Yes.
With this foreign buyer ban. And I said, it's just not fair to put us all in this position of now we have to profile people and figure out where they're from.
I could not agree with you more. It makes me very uncomfortable.
I am so uncomfortable with
So
it.
what I do is the way I do it, and I mean, it's just, I guess, really for me, because I know I have to do it, is that everybody gets it. You could tell me that you were born in Nova Scotia, you're getting the form.
Yeah.
Everybody gets the form. Everybody gets the same talk. And then I say, this form goes to absolutely everybody. Everybody has to sign it, and this is why. But I agree, it makes me extremely uncomfortable, right?
I mean, I don't feel uncomfortable asking somebody that I know apparently has been born in Nova Scotia all their life, and I know this.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not uncomfortable but when a new person calls me and I have this conversation, then I'm feeling like, and I say, I have to ask everybody these questions.
Yeah, totally.
But you still feel awkward. It feels awkward.
It does.
really does.
It does. And I mean, because, I always start when I meet new clients. And the first thing I say is, tell me a bit about yourself, right? And that gives people the opportunity. And most likely, if you say to me, tell me a little bit about yourself, the first thing I'm going to say to you is that I was born in Newfoundland. That's the first thing I say. We are Newfoundlanders. We're quite proud. I mean, that's what it is. But still, it's usually what people are going to start with. And it's such an easy way to get people to tell you where they're from, right? But, or if you think that somebody has a beautiful accent or an accent, and you're picking up something, don't assume and say, oh, are you from blah, blah, blah. But maybe just say your accent is beautiful. May I ask, where your accent is from or something like that, but just something a little bit a little more sensitive. I don't want to say better, but more sensitive than asking people directly where they're from. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some ways to encourage change, my favorite part. So the best way I think that you can help people, encourage people to change their language is by just using the right language back to them. Oh man, this master bedroom is amazing. Yeah, I know, the primary is huge. Gosh, I really would love to have a master bathroom. Yeah, no, having an ensuite bath would be really convenient. And one of my favorite things that I love and that I feel so much gratification from is realizing that people have changed their language because of me. I admit it. It might be totally selfish in some ways, but I love it. It feels incredible. I have clients all the time that use master bedroom and master bathroom, and they say master, I say primary. They say master, I say main. And I'm back and forth, and I'll do it 20 times in one viewing. And then all of a sudden we walk into a house and they say, oh man, this primary bedroom is great. And I'm like, oh, you did it, hey, right? So it's always an easy way to get people to change their language is just by constantly using the right language. Another great way, and I hope that maybe I proved this a little bit today, is by telling people the history of the words and the phrases and the terms so that they, and make it a fun history lesson. Man, do you know where grandfathered in comes from? Man, let me tell you, I just learned it, right? And make it something fun and interesting and interactive that they can learn about. And make sure as well, it's really nice in a non, I don't know how to say this, in a kind and sensitive way. It's nice too to commend people. I have people in the office that have been using master bedroom forever, and everybody knows that you can't say it around me, right? So everybody knows that I'm the language person. So then somebody will say, oh, Tanya, man, wait do you see the master? I'm so sorry. I meant the primary. And I always go, don't apologize. You caught yourself. That's amazing. Catching yourself, you don't stop saying a phrase or a word you've been saying your entire life in a day. It doesn't happen. It takes time. Do you know how long it took me to stop? Like there are words I can't even, especially some of our Newfoundland sayings that it took me a very long time to stop saying because they're just so embedded in our culture. I know, I can't even. There's a couple that the shame. But anyways, so you just have to remind yourself and be kind to yourself that it might take a little bit of time.
250 times to create a habit.
Yeah.
200 times to break it.
Wow, say that again.
250 times to create a habit.
Yeah.
2200 to break it.
Oh my God, I got to write that down. That's fantastic.
Is that why it's so hard to stick with the kid?
That is fantastic. Thank you for that. Oh, that's going in the next one. Thank you. And another really important thing that I think is really important is not to embarrass people. If somebody is using harmful language on purpose, you totally say something. Stand up for people, right? I have no problem cutting people off and telling them that their language is inappropriate when I know that they're doing it on purpose. But when somebody says grandfathered in and they have no idea the history of the word, maybe pull them aside and tell them the history lesson or talk to them, but talk to them privately. Don't make people feel ashamed in front of a group of people who might also not really understand the meaning of the word, because that's not going to teach anybody anything. And it's just going to make them feel really bad.
I like the idea of a lot of scripts, of course, role playing.
Yes.
And the grandfathered in is really sticking with me.
Oh,
because I'm like,
good.
oh my gosh, I can't count how many times I've used that. Like, is this going to be an issue? Like, no, it's been grandfathered in.
Totally.
So as we've been going through this, I'm kind of rolling around in my head, how do I have a mental script? So when somebody says to me, is this grandfathered in? I'm like, you're absolutely right. This is exempt because of precedent that was set before. And
Yeah.
just what's my new phrase going to be to get them into it? And I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to keep myself from doing that? Because it always feels very like, I'm hip and I know whatever when I say that.
Client would say, I wonder why it's called grandfathered in. And I said, that's a good question. Now I know.
Then now you know, right?
And
Yeah.
love it or list it are now saying primary.
Yes, I
Right.
noticed that, and I
the
was
Crosby
very
brothers
appreciative.
have changed it as well.
Totally. And I mean, we watch it happen. It's this trickle down effect, right? It takes, and you're right, it takes so long. And I mean, but I really did when I was practicing this a little bit last night. And when I was saying master bedroom and master bathroom, I was thinking it's so much better now than it was even a year ago. And I'm really happy for that. What are some other words and phrases that you heard today that you were surprised by, or that are ones that you,
Cakewalk.
Cakewalk? Totally, right?
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake? Totally.
Yeah.
That
Going
one,
down the fort too. is
Yeah.
Like,
totally.
I guess that one's pretty obvious, but at the same
But
time.
it's not.
it Just, yeah, it slips out.
Yeah, because it's just what we say, right? And that's the point of all this, is that it's just things that we say that we don't mean harm by.
Do we have another, I'm sorry for being late, but.
That's okay.
Do we have another idea of what we should use instead of grandfather that you probably told me? just-
Exempt. Yeah, just say it's exempt.
Are the
Nice and
lawyers
easy.
using grandfather terms though? Because I feel like they are.
They are, lawyers are a
Yeah.
huge part of the problem with
Yeah.
grandfathered in, for sure,
Yeah.
big time. I hear it all the time. And luckily, I mean, usually if I'm speaking to them privately, then I just go, hey, and then I tell them the story.
Yeah.
Everybody hears the history lesson on grandfathered in.
Yeah, that's quite a story.
It's
yeah.
pretty cool. And so, and I also invite you afterwards, if you have anything that, a word or a phrase that you've been thinking about that you think I should add to this, or anything like that, please make sure you let me know. Send me a text or say hi or whatever else. So we're all done. And I wanted to end with my very favorite quote in the entire world by one of my favorite human beings that has ever lived. Maya Angelou. Do the best you can until you know better. And then once you know better, do better. Thank you.
It's one of my favorite quotes.
Totally.